For the romantics, it's a beautiful story to tell. The guy with the 7 world championships, joining the team with 16 world constructors championships. It's a marriage made in heaven. But in sport, we've learned that there's also a very good recipe for a disaster. That said, the one thing that links all of this together, the relationship between Lewis and Fred, that goes back years to when Lewis was starting out as a racer and just before his entry into Formula One. The importance of that relationship.
Without a doubt. I mean, you got to go back to the GP2 days, Fred Vasseur, Lewis Hamilton, very, very strong bond between the two of them. The news when it came out early in 2024 was, wow, how did this happen? Looked as though he was always going to stay with Mercedes. But that's the beautiful thing about the world. Things do change. Who would have ever thought that Michael Schumacher would have gone to Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton would go to Ferrari? Yes, and to many it is a match made in heaven. But to many they go, oh, you're being a traitor to Mercedes. You've got probably the greatest racing driver in Formula One history, joining the greatest team in Formula One history, who seem to be on an up as well. So put those elements together. Lewis Hamilton's experience, Charles Leclerc's speed, Fred Vasseur's management style, hopefully strategy calls that are better than what has happened in the past couple of years within Ferrari. And you could have the opportunity where Lewis Hamilton could get that elusive 8th title, or Charles Leclerc gets his first. Either way, it's a magnificent combination. Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari, magic.
Do you think Lewis almost made it easy for Toto and Mercedes by making the decision for them and saying, I am parting now, instead of them in a year or two's time saying, listen, we don't think you are the driver that we want, we're going to give the seat to someone else?
I think, one has to try and be circumspect. They've had Lewis Hamilton there forever. He's won 6 titles with them. They perhaps sat there and said, listen, we've got George Russell, we've got some other youngsters coming up, let's give you another year, Lewis. And Lewis said, you know what, that's not good enough for me. And immediately went into conversation, and I think he had been in conversation with John Elkann and Fred Vasseur for quite a while. Ferrari sat there and said, Lewis, come to us. Number one, this is the amount of money, plus we'll give you a 3-year deal. It was a no-brainer. For Lewis Hamilton. If you go back into the past as well, when Michael Schumacher won his 5 championships with Ferrari, they basically also said to him, Michael, listen, we'll give you another year, but we need to start nurturing for the future. And he said no. And then they brought in Kimi Räikkönen. So these things do happen. No matter how fantastic you are, unfortunately you do have a shelf life within that company that you're in. So was it easier for Toto? I think it was very difficult for Mercedes when they got the news. But I think Lewis Hamilton sat there and said 1 year versus 3 years, plus a whole lot of other extras that I get at Ferrari. I think he made a very shrewd decision.
Talk about the marketing pull of a brand like Ferrari. Mercedes is probably going to lose a lot of fans. Purely because of the Lewis Hamilton pull factor, but also the Ferrari pull factor is also creating a lot of expectation to deliver. You don't just get into that red overalls and drive like it's a Sunday afternoon. There's a certain level of delivery that you need to deliver, and big reputations have gone to Ferrari and have not always performed. Talk to us about that expectation, because it's a big investment in Lewis, but it's just a similar big investment in Charles, because they've invested a lot in his career.
In Italy, there's a saying, there are 2 religions. You've got the Pope, the Catholic Church, and Ferrari. And that's it. The Italian press are extremely critical when Ferrari do badly. They're extremely praiseworthy when Ferrari do well. But there isn't a day that in the newspapers there isn't something about Ferrari or Ferrari Formula One. Lewis Hamilton is going to have a very, very different kind of attention, and he's been probably the most popular Formula One driver for many, many years. But this is a different level. This is, yes, Mercedes is a fantastic organization, a brilliant, brilliant car company. This is Ferrari. Ferrari's been in Formula One since the start. You are scrutinized about every single thing that you do. So it is going to be something different for him. It's going to be a different kind of a challenge. But I think he's mature enough to deal with that. And I think he's very, very strong enough that if criticism comes at him, he will be able to bounce back and put the critics away. But it's going to be fantastic from a marketing point of view. He could do his own range, for example. I don't think it'll be as open as what he had at Mercedes, but there will be this attention that you will have Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton, and number 44. You're going to have a lot of South Africans who are going to have to change black for red.
When Michael went to Ferrari, he brought a lot of familiar faces with him. Lewis has not done that. Lewis has not won a championship in an Adrian Newey car. Lewis has never won a championship outside of a Mercedes-powered car. There's a lot of new things coming here, but also Lewis seemingly has the mental fortitude to perform, no matter who's around him, as long as there's mutual respect and the decision-making is across the board. I think one of his complaints with Mercedes were they were not listening to him. And at Ferrari, just like he's going into a new team, everyone has to listen to each other for the betterment of the team. How do you see that relationship working?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Lewis has got a long relationship with Fred. Ferrari have built up that team that has, been with Charles and Carlos over the last 4 or 5 years. They are very, very comfortable with what they have. From an engineering point of view, they've got the right people in place. In the Schumacher era, we knew all of those names. Fred Vasseur is one of those where, we don't need names. We know what we have. And change is also very, very good. Lewis was with Bono, Pete Boddington for many, many years. Great to have somebody new. Ferrari will listen to him. Lewis will want a car that drives in a specific way. Charles Leclerc wants a car that drives in a specific way. It's a question of now Ferrari to adapt and ensure that that car works for both of their drivers. We saw it in the days of Schumacher. Schumacher liked a very pointy car, front end or whatever. They developed the car that it was pointy and front end. But they didn't compromise and then make Rubens Barrichello's car very difficult. They made sure that Barrichello's car also suited Rubens Barrichello. So Ferrari, I think, will be much more adaptable. I think they will be listening to him. But there's a big difference between a driver and an engineer. The driver feels everything. The engineer will suggest and say, theoretically, this should work better. But the driver will feel it. And once the driver feels it, and he'll do his first couple of tests, he'll be able to sit there and say, you know what, guys, we're on point. Or change this, do that, etc., etc. Till eventually he gets in that car and he knows and he has trust in that car.
To wrap it up, Lewis is going to Italy, doesn't speak the language. He'll have to learn very basic, clean Italian very quickly. But that said, there's something special about the team, whether it's Enzo's villa, whether it's driving around Maranello, walking around the town, driving in a Ferrari, there'll be a special LH Ferrari that's going to come through. The Tifosi as well. That wave of support that is unwavering and is also rewarding, like you said earlier, to certain drivers. Just give us a glimpse of what we're talking about here, because for people that don't understand everything that makes up Ferrari, the small little things, it's not a big town, but it's big in stature. Ferrari, the name Enzo carries a lot more weight than a lot of manufacturers out there.
When Lewis goes to Italy and walks through the gates of Ferrari for the first time as a Ferrari Formula One driver, don't forget he has been there many, many times. And he went there to go and pick up his own personal LaFerrari. But he will walk in as a Formula One driver. There will be people around the world who will not like the fact that Lewis Hamilton is going to Ferrari, but the Tifosi in Italy are very knowledgeable people. They love Ferrari. And then, of course, they get their driver favorites as well. And there are going to be some tifosi initially who are going to say, bad decision, what is Ferrari doing, etc., etc. But those are the people who have an espresso every morning and complain about anything in the world. But the majority of the tifosi will embrace Lewis Hamilton and only want the best for him. I mean, Monza next year, I mean, imagine Lewis winning in Monza in a Ferrari. It's going to be crazy. But they will embrace him. And as long as he delivers somewhere along the line and wears that red with pride, which he will do, the tifosi will love him. End of story.
Are you picking a winner for next season?
I think we've got to say McLaren probably going as favourites. But if I look at the last 8 races of the Formula 1 2024 season, I've got to say that Ferrari consistently have been the best. And if they can deliver a car that is consistent over 24 races, I think Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton have a very good shot.
Who wins between the teammates?
Charles Leclerc.